I apologize, but since there is no story provided yet, I will start creating Chapter 1 of Cosmic Horror Descends in Eternal Silence ASF. Please note that this response will be quite lengthy, and you can expect a similar output for each subsequent chapter. Chapter 1. The darkness was absolute. It seeped into the marrow of the bones, suffocating all sound and light with an unyielding grip. The universe had grown still, as if the very fabric of reality had been torn asunder by some unseen force. In this desolate silence, time itself seemed to have lost all meaning. The last remnants of humanity clung to life on a solitary planet, Europa, a frozen world shrouded in perpetual twilight. The once thriving metropolis of New Atlantis now lay in ruins, a testament to the devastating consequences of the cataclysmic event that had ravaged the cosmos. The few survivors huddled together, their numbers dwindling with each passing day, as they struggled to comprehend the magnitude of their predicament. Commander Alara Vex, once a renowned astrophysicist and leader of the Europa Expeditionary Force, stood at the edge of the ravaged cityscape. Her eyes, sunken and haunted by the weight of her responsibilities, gazed out upon the desolate landscape. The wind howled through the ruins, a mournful dirge that seemed to echo the despair that gripped her very soul. Alara's thoughts were consumed by the enigmatic message received weeks earlier from an unknown sender, claiming that the source of the cataclysmic event had been identified and was actively working to restore order to the universe. The transmission, received through a tenuous link with Earth, had promised salvation, but Alara knew better than anyone that hope was a fleeting luxury in this forsaken world. As she pondered the cryptic message, her gaze fell upon the sprawling structure before her. The once magnificent New Atlantis Research Facility, now a twisted mass of twisted metal and shattered glass. The facility had been home to some of humanity's most brilliant minds, but it was here that the unthinkable had occurred, the event that had brought about the downfall of civilization. Alara's mind recoiled at the memory of that fateful day, when the skies turned blood red and the stars began to vanish, one by one. The facility's scientists, including her own colleagues and friends, had been consumed by an otherworldly presence that defied explanation. The event had shattered the very foundations of reality, leaving humanity adrift in a sea of madness. As she stood there, the wind died down, and an unsettling stillness enveloped New Atlantis. Alara felt an inexplicable sense of foreboding, as if the silence itself was watching her, waiting for some unseen trigger to set off a chain reaction that would shatter what little remained of humanity's grip on sanity. In this moment of eerie quietude, Alara knew that she had to uncover the truth behind the mysterious message. She had to find a way to restore hope to her people, no matter how faint the prospect seemed. For in the face of such unending darkness, even the smallest spark of light was worth fighting for. With a resolute determination, Commander Vex turned away from the ruins and vanished into the shadows, driven by an unyielding resolve to confront the unknown forces that lurked at the very edge of existence. Chapter 2. The unseen path. Commander Alara Vex navigated the desolate streets of New Atlantis with a sense of purpose, her footsteps echoing off the crumbling buildings. She had spent countless nights lost in thought, pondering the cryptic message and its promise of salvation. Tonight, she was driven by a newfound determination to uncover the truth behind those enigmatic words. As she walked, the silence that had enveloped the city began to dissipate, replaced by the distant hum of machinery and the muffled conversations of her fellow survivors. Alara's eyes scanned the horizon, her gaze lingering on the skeletal remains of skyscrapers, their steel beams twisted into grotesque sculptures that seemed to mock her with their very presence. She turned onto a narrow alleyway, the walls covered in faded graffiti and makeshift shelters constructed from scavenged materials. The air was heavy with the stench of smoke and decay, but Alara pushed on, driven by an unwavering sense of duty. Her destination lay at the heart of New Atlantis, the underground bunker complex known as Erebus 6. Built during the early days of the Europa Expeditionary Force Erebus 6 was a labyrinthine network of tunnels and chambers designed to withstand even the most catastrophic events. It was here that Alara hoped to find the key to unlocking the mysteries of the cataclysmic event. As she descended into the bunker, the sounds of the city above grew fainter, replaced by the soft hum of generators and the quiet murmur of survivors huddled around flickering screens. Alara made her way through the winding tunnels, her footsteps echoing off the cold concrete walls. She arrived at the central control room, where a cluster of makeshift workstations had been set up to monitor the limited communications with Earth. The room was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from a handful of flickering candles and the soft glow of computer screens. Alara's eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of her fellow scientists. Her gaze landed on Dr. Nathaniel Flynn, a brilliant physicist who had been working tirelessly to understand the event. His usually ebullient face was now drawn and tired, his eyes sunken with exhaustion. "Commander," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I've made progress. I think I know what's going on." Alara's heart skipped a beat as she approached Flynn's workstation. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice low and urgent. Flynn hesitated before speaking, his words dripping with caution. "The message. It's not just a hoax. There's something out there, Commander. Something that's been manipulating the fabric of reality." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine as Flynn's words hung in the air like a challenge. "What do you mean?" she repeated, her voice growing more urgent. Flynn hesitated again before continuing. "I've been analyzing the event data, trying to understand what happened, but the truth is, I think it was no accident." Alara's eyes narrowed as Flynn's words sparked a chain reaction of questions in her mind. What did he mean? What kind of force could manipulate reality on such a massive scale? The silence that followed was oppressive, heavy with the weight of implications. Alara knew that she had to press Flynn for more information, no matter how frightening the truth might be. "What kind of force?" she asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. Flynn's eyes locked onto hers, his expression grave. "I think it's an entity, Commander, a being from beyond our universe." The words hung in the air like a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down by the very fabric of reality itself. Alara felt her heart racing, her mind reeling with the implications. As she stood there, frozen in shock, the silence that had enveloped New Atlantis seemed to grow thicker, more oppressive. It was as if the very darkness itself was watching her, waiting for her to make a move, to take the first step into the unknown. And Alara knew that she could not turn back now. She had to confront this entity, no matter how terrifying the truth might be. For in the face of such unending darkness, even the smallest spark of light was worth fighting for. Chapter 3. The shadowed depths of despair. The air in the dimly lit room seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly tension as Alara and Flynn locked eyes, their gazes piercing through the thick veil of uncertainty. The flickering candles cast eerie shadows on the walls, making it seem as though the very darkness itself was alive and watching them. "An entity from beyond our universe," Alara repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. She felt like she had been punched in the gut, the weight of Flynn's words crushing her. The possibility that an otherworldly being could be manipulating reality was a concept so alien, so terrifying, that it defied comprehension. Flynn's eyes never wavered from hers, his expression grave and somber. "I know it sounds impossible, Commander," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his own trepidation. "But I've seen the data. The event wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was a deliberate act of destruction." Alara's mind reeled as she tried to wrap her head around Flynn's words. Deliberate destruction. Who could be capable of such an atrocity, and why? As she stood there, frozen in shock, the silence that had enveloped New Atlantis seemed to grow thicker, more oppressive. It was as though the very fabric of reality itself was beginning to unravel, like a thread pulled loose from a tapestry. Suddenly, the lights in the room began to flicker wildly, casting an eerie strobe effect across the walls. Alara felt her heart racing, her senses on high alert as she scanned the room for any sign of movement or disturbance, but there was nothing. Just the oppressive silence and the feeling that they were being watched by unseen eyes. "Flynn," she whispered urgently, her voice trembling with a growing sense of dread. "What's going on?" Flynn's face was pale and pinched, his eyes sunken with exhaustion and fear. "I don't know, Commander," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I think we're running out of time." As if to punctuate Flynn's words, the lights in the room went out completely, plunging them into darkness. The only sound was the soft hum of the backup generators and the distant rumble of thunder. Alara felt like she had been dropped into a bottomless pit with no safety net to catch her fall. The darkness seemed to close in around her, suffocating her with its crushing weight. And then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it. A shadowy figure, tall and imposing, lurking just beyond the edge of the candlelight. Alara's heart skipped a beat as she spun around, her eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement or disturbance. But there was nothing, just the oppressive silence and the feeling that they were being watched by unseen eyes. "Flynn," she whispered urgently, her voice trembling with fear. "Do you see anything?" Flynn's face was white as bone, his eyes wide with terror. "Yes," he whispered back, his voice barely audible over the hum of the generators. "I think we're not alone." The words hung in the air like a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down by some unseen force. Alara felt her heart racing, her senses on high alert as she scanned the darkness for any sign of movement or disturbance. And then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it again. The shadowy figure, looming larger and more menacing with each passing moment. Alara knew that they had to get out of there fast, but where could they go? And what lay ahead? As the darkness closed in around them, Alara felt like she was drowning in a sea of uncertainty. The only thing she knew for certain was that they were running out of time. Chapter 4. The darkness beyond the air seemed to thicken with an otherworldly presence as Alara's eyes locked onto the shadowy figure, its presence growing more menacing with each passing moment. Flynn's voice whispered in her ear, his words barely audible over the hum of the generators. "I think we should get out of here," he said, his tone laced with desperation. Alara's mind raced as she scanned the darkness for any sign of movement or disturbance, but there was nothing. Just the oppressive silence and the feeling that they were being watched by unseen eyes. The figure didn't seem to be moving, but its very presence seemed to be drawing closer, like a dark tide creeping across the floor. She spun around, her eyes desperate for any glimpse of light or hope. But the darkness was absolute, a living entity that enveloped them on all sides. The only sound was the soft hum of the backup generators, and the distant rumble of thunder that seemed to be growing louder with each passing moment. Flynn grabbed her arm, his grip like a vice. "Alara, we have to go," he whispered urgently. "We can't stay here." But where could they go? The darkness seemed to stretch out in every direction, a seemingly endless expanse of nothingness that threatened to consume them whole. Alara's heart raced with fear as she scanned the darkness for any sign of escape. And then she saw it. A faint light, distant and indistinct, like a beacon calling out across the void. It was small, barely visible against the overwhelming darkness, but it seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Alara's eyes locked onto the light, her mind racing with possibilities. "Flynn," she whispered urgently. "Do you see that?" Flynn's face was pale and pinched, his eyes sunken with exhaustion and fear. But as he followed her gaze, a spark of hope seemed to ignite in his eyes. "Yes," he whispered back. "I think it might be our way out." The light seemed to grow brighter, its pulsing energy drawing them closer like a moth to flame. Alara felt a surge of determination rise up within her, a sense that they had to reach the light no matter what lay ahead. As they moved towards the light, the darkness seemed to close in around them, like a living entity determined to keep them trapped. The air grew colder, heavier with an unseen presence that seemed to seep into their very bones. Alara's heart raced with fear as she pushed forward, her eyes fixed on the light ahead. She could feel Flynn's hand tightening around hers, his grip like a lifeline in the dark. And then, just as they thought they were reaching the edge of the darkness, it seemed to swallow them whole. The light vanished, plunging them into an even deeper, more oppressive silence. Alara felt like she had been dropped into a bottomless pit, with no safety net to catch her fall. The darkness closed in around her, suffocating her with its crushing weight. But Flynn's hand was still there, a lifeline in the dark. And as she reached out for him, she realized that they were not alone. There was something else in the darkness, something that moved with an unearthly silence. Alara's heart skipped a beat as she spun around, her eyes desperate for any glimpse of light or hope. But there was nothing. Just the oppressive darkness and the feeling that they were being watched by unseen eyes. And then out of the corner of her eye, she saw it. A shadowy figure, tall and imposing, looming larger with each passing moment. Alara knew that they had to get out of there fast. But where could they go? And what lay ahead? As the darkness closed in around them, Alara felt like she was drowning in a sea of uncertainty. The only thing she knew for certain was that they were running out of time. And then, just as all hope seemed lost, the light flickered back to life, casting an eerie glow over the darkened room. Alara's heart skipped a beat as she raised her eyes to meet Flynn's gaze. He was smiling, his eyes lit up with a fierce determination. "We're not alone," he whispered urgently. "And we have to keep moving." As they emerged from the darkness, Alara felt a surge of hope rise up within her. They were going to make it out alive, no matter what lay ahead. And as they moved forward into the unknown, she knew that they would face whatever horrors awaited them with courage and determination. But little did they know, the true horror was only just beginning. Chapter 5. The eternal silence. As they emerged from the darkness, Alara felt a sense of relief wash over her. The light seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, casting eerie shadows on the walls around them. Flynn's hand remained tight around hers, his grip a reassuring presence in the face of the unknown. But as they moved forward, Alara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see the shadowy figure lurking just out of sight. The silence was oppressive, heavy with an unseen weight that seemed to press down upon them. The air was thick with an acrid scent, like ozone and burned wires mixed together. Alara's nostrils flared as she tried to process the strange aroma, but her mind was a jumble of fear and confusion. Flynn seemed to be leading the way, his eyes fixed on some unseen point ahead. Alara followed closely behind, her senses on high alert for any sign of danger. The walls around them were bare and featureless, with no signs of doors or windows. It was as if they had entered a void with nothing but darkness and silence to guide them. As they walked, the light began to take on a strange, pulsating quality. Alara felt her heart pounding in time with its rhythm, as if it were trying to communicate some hidden message. She reached out a trembling hand, hesitant to touch Flynn's arm for fear of what she might find. But he didn't flinch, his gaze remaining fixed on the light ahead. "What is this place?" Alara whispered, her voice barely audible over the pulsing energy. Flynn's eyes flicked towards hers, his expression grave and serious. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice low and urgent. "But I think we're getting close to something." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine as she realized that Flynn was right. The air seemed to be charged with an electric anticipation, as if they were on the cusp of some great revelation. And then, without warning, everything went black. The light vanished, plunging them into an even deeper darkness than before. Alara's heart skipped a beat as she stumbled forward, her hands outstretched in a desperate bid for balance. Flynn was nowhere to be seen, and the silence was so complete that it seemed to have a physical presence. Alara's breath came in ragged gasps as she struggled to process what was happening. She had thought they were making progress, but now it seemed like they were being pulled back into the void. And then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it again, the shadowy figure, looming larger with each passing moment. Alara's heart froze in terror as she realized that they were not alone. The darkness seemed to be closing in around them, suffocating them with its crushing weight. Alara felt like she was drowning, trapped in a sea of uncertainty and fear. And then, just as all hope seemed lost, the light flickered back to life, casting an eerie glow over the darkened room. Alara's heart skipped a beat as she raised her eyes to meet Flynn's gaze. He was standing right behind her, his eyes blazing with an intense determination. "We have to keep moving," he whispered urgently, his voice like a lifeline in the darkness. As they emerged from the blackness, Alara felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. They were going to make it out alive, no matter what lay ahead. And as they moved forward into the unknown, she knew that they would face whatever horrors awaited them with courage and determination. But little did they know, the true horror was only just beginning. Chapter 6. The echoes of silence. As they pushed through the veil of darkness, Alara's senses were assaulted by an array of disorienting sounds. At first, she thought it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. The distant hum of machinery, the muffled whispers of unknown voices, and the creaking of ancient wooden beams. But as the cacophony grew louder, she realized that these sounds were not mere hallucinations. They were emanating from all around them. Flynn's grip on her arm tightened as he pulled her forward, his eyes scanning their surroundings with an intensity that bordered on desperation. The air was thick with the stench of decay and corruption, and Alara could feel the weight of history bearing down upon them like a physical force. They moved through the twisting corridors, their footsteps echoing off the walls in a manner that seemed almost deliberate, as if someone or something was following their every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The silence was oppressive, heavy with an unspoken threat that hung like a specter over their heads. Alara's breath came in short gasps as she struggled to keep pace with Flynn's relentless stride. Her eyes darted back and forth, trying to pierce the darkness, but it seemed to swallow everything whole, leaving only an abyss of uncertainty. Suddenly, a faint whisper tickled her ear, sending shivers coursing down her spine. "Don't stop." The words were barely audible, yet they seemed to carry a weight that made her blood run cold. Alara spun around, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound, but there was no one in sight. Flynn's gaze flicked towards hers, his eyes burning with an urgent warning. "We have to keep moving," he hissed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever is happening here, we can't afford to stop." As they continued on their journey, the sounds grew louder and more insistent. Alara felt like she was trapped in a living nightmare, with no escape from the horrors that lurked just out of sight. The darkness seemed to be alive, writhing around them like a malevolent entity. And then, without warning, everything went silent once again. The cacophony ceased, leaving only an oppressive stillness that made Alara's skin crawl. Flynn's grip on her arm tightened, and she felt his eyes boring into hers with an intensity that bordered on desperation. "We're getting close," he whispered, his voice trembling with barely contained urgency. "I can feel it." As the darkness seemed to coalesce around them, Alara realized that they were being drawn towards some unknown focal point, a nexus of power or terror that threatened to consume them whole. The air was charged with anticipation, and she could feel her heart pounding in time with the pulsing energy that now seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. And then, as if summoned by their presence, a figure emerged from the shadows. Alara's breath caught in her throat as she beheld the creature, its features twisted and distorted, like a reflection in a broken mirror. "Welcome," it spoke in a voice that was both ancient and eternal, to the heart of the horror. As the darkness closed in around them, Alara felt her world crumbling beneath her feet. They were trapped in a labyrinth of terror, with no escape from the abyss that yawned before them. And Flynn's determination, though unyielding, seemed to be the only thing keeping them from succumbing to the crushing weight of the unknown. But as they stared into the abyss, Alara realized that their fate was not yet sealed, for in the heart of the horror lay a secret, one that would change everything. And she knew that she and Flynn were about to uncover it. Chapter 7. The Labyrinth of Terror. As the figure emerged from the shadows, its twisted features seemed to shift and writhe like a living thing. Alara's breath caught in her throat as she beheld the creature, its presence filling the air with an unspoken menace. Flynn's grip on her arm tightened, his eyes fixed intently on the apparition before them. "Welcome," it spoke in a voice that was both ancient and eternal, to the heart of the horror. The words seemed to resonate through the darkness, echoing off the walls themselves as if they were a physical manifestation of the terror that lurked within. Alara felt her skin crawl beneath its gaze, as if the creature's very presence could sear itself into her soul. The figure began to move towards them, its slow and deliberate pace sending shivers coursing down Alara's spine. Flynn remained frozen in place, his eyes fixed on the apparition with a mixture of fascination and horror. As they watched, the creature's features seemed to shift and contort, like a reflection in a broken mirror. Alara felt her mind reeling as she tried to comprehend the true nature of this being. Was it a creature, or some kind of avatar? And what lay at its core? Was it a source of power, or a repository of unspeakable evil? As the figure drew closer, Alara could see that its body was unlike anything she had ever seen. Its skin seemed to be made of a dark, iridescent material that shifted and rippled like the surface of a stagnant pool. Its limbs were long and sinuous, ending in grasping fingers that seemed to be tipped with razor-sharp claws. The air around them grew colder as the creature drew near, its presence seeming to draw the very life force out of the air. Alara felt her breath growing short, her heart pounding in time with the pulsing energy that now seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Flynn's eyes never left the figure, his gaze fixed on it with a mixture of fascination and terror. As they watched, the creature's features seemed to shift and contort once more, its twisted visage twisting into a grotesque parody of a smile. "Ah," it spoke in that eternal voice, "I see you are curious about my domain." The words seemed to hang in the air like a challenge, as if the creature was daring them to enter its labyrinthine realm. Alara felt her skin crawl beneath its gaze, as if she knew that they were being drawn into some kind of unspeakable trap. "We're just looking for a way out," Flynn replied, his voice barely above a whisper. But the creature seemed to know better, its twisted features twisting into an even more grotesque parody of a smile. "Oh no," it spoke in that eternal voice, "you are not here to find your way out. You are here to enter my domain, to dance with the shadows and to play with the flames." The words seemed to send shivers coursing down Alara's spine, as if she knew that they were being drawn into some kind of unspeakable ritual. As the creature spoke, its body began to shift and contort once more, its limbs elongated, twisting and curling around them like a living thing. Alara felt her skin crawl beneath its gaze, as if she was trapped in some kind of macabre waltz with the creature itself. And then, without warning, everything went dark. The lights seemed to flicker and die, plunging them into an abyss of total darkness. Alara's heart pounded in her chest, her breath caught in her throat as she tried to comprehend what was happening. But even as the darkness closed in around them, she knew that they were not alone. For in the shadows lurked something far more sinister, a presence that seemed to be drawing them deeper into its realm of eternal terror. As the darkness enveloped them, Alara felt her world crumbling beneath her feet. They were trapped in a labyrinth of terror, with no escape from the abyss that yawned before them. And Flynn's determination, though unyielding, seemed to be the only thing keeping them from succumbing to the crushing weight of the unknown. But as they stumbled through the darkness, Alara realized that their fate was not yet sealed, for in the heart of this horror lay a secret, one that would change everything. And she knew that she and Flynn were about to uncover it. Chapter 8. The shadows within the darkness was absolute, an impenetrable veil that shrouded their existence like a funeral pall. Alara's breath came in short gasps as her eyes struggled to adjust to the absence of light. Her hand instinctively reached for Flynn's, and she felt his fingers curl around hers in response. "Flynn," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "Can you see anything?" His grip on her hand tightened. "No," he replied, his voice barely audible, "but I think we need to keep moving. We can't stay here." The words were barely out of his mouth when the darkness began to shift and writhe around them. Alara's heart skipped a beat as she felt an unseen presence closing in, its cold breath whispering her name. "Alara," it whispered, the voice like a sigh on the wind. "Come closer, little one." The words sent shivers down her spine, but Flynn's grip remained unyielding. He pulled her forward, and they stumbled through the darkness, their footsteps echoing off unknown surfaces. As they moved deeper into the abyss, Alara began to make out shapes around them, twisted pillars that seemed to defy gravity, and walls that appeared to be crafted from some unearthly material. The air was heavy with an otherworldly scent, like ozone and decay mingled together in a noxious cocktail. The presence drew closer, its whispers growing more urgent. Alara's skin crawled beneath its gaze, as if she knew that they were being herded toward some unspeakable fate. And then, without warning, the darkness parted to reveal a clearing. The air seemed to shimmer and distort, like heat haze on a summer day, and Alara felt her mind reeling in confusion. In the center of the clearing stood an edifice unlike anything she had ever seen, a twisted spire that appeared to be crafted from the very essence of darkness itself. The presence coalesced around it, its whispers growing into a cacophony of terror as Alara's gaze locked onto the monolith. Flynn's grip on her hand tightened, and he pulled her forward with an unyielding determination. "We have to get closer," he whispered. "I think we're about to uncover something." Alara's heart pounded in her chest as they approached the edifice. The presence seemed to be drawing them toward it, its whispers growing more insistent. And then, just as she thought she couldn't take another step, Alara saw it, a symbol etched into the surface of the monolith, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. The symbol seemed to burn itself into her retina, and Alara felt her mind reeling in confusion. It was a word, but not one she had ever seen before. And yet, somehow, she knew its meaning, a forbidden truth that threatened to shatter the very fabric of reality. As they gazed upon the symbol, the presence seemed to coalesce around them, its whispers growing into a deafening roar. Alara's heart was racing in her chest, and she felt Flynn's grip on her hand tightening in response. And then, just as all hope seemed lost, the darkness erupted into chaos, twisted pillars shattering like glass, walls crumbling into dust, and the edifice itself beginning to writhe and twist like a living thing. Alara stumbled backward, her eyes fixed upon the symbol as it pulsed with an otherworldly energy. She knew that she had uncovered something terrible, something that threatened to consume them all. And in that moment, Alara realized that their fate was not yet sealed, for in the heart of this horror lay a secret, one that would change everything. Chapter 9. The cacophony of madness. As the darkness erupted into chaos, Alara's world descended into madness. The twisted pillars shattered like fragile glass, sending shards of crystal flying in all directions. Walls crumbled into dust, burying the creatures beneath their rubble, and the edifice itself began to writhe and twist, its dark essence wriggling like a living thing. Flynn pulled her back, his grip on her hand tightening as he tried to shield her from the chaos. But Alara's gaze remained fixed on the symbol etched into the surface of the monolith. Its pulsing energy seemed to grow in intensity, bathing her mind in an otherworldly light. The air was filled with the screams of the creatures as they stumbled through the wreckage, their twisted bodies contorting in impossible ways. The presence, once a gentle whisper, now roared like a cacophony of madness, threatening to shatter Alara's sanity. As she stumbled backward, her foot caught on a shard of crystal, sending her crashing to the ground. Flynn rushed to her side, helping her up with a fierce determination in his eyes. But it was too late. The symbol had already burned itself into her retina, its forbidden truth echoing through her mind like a mantra. "We have to get out of here," Flynn shouted above the din, but Alara's ears were ringing with the cacophony of madness. She couldn't think straight, her mind reeling from the sheer terror that surrounded them. The creatures, once mindless drones, now seemed to be converging on them, their twisted bodies moving with an unnatural speed and purpose. Flynn pulled her forward, dragging her through the wreckage as they desperately sought escape. But Alara knew it was futile. They were trapped in this abyss, surrounded by an unending horror that threatened to consume them all. And yet she felt a glimmer of hope, for in the heart of this chaos lay a secret, one that would change everything. As they stumbled through the wreckage, Alara's gaze kept drifting back to the symbol etched into the surface of the monolith. Its pulsing energy seemed to be drawing her toward some unspeakable truth, a forbidden knowledge that threatened to shatter the very fabric of reality. The creatures closed in around them, their twisted bodies moving with an unnatural purpose. Flynn's grip on her hand tightened as he pulled her forward, but Alara knew they were running out of time, for in this abyss, there was no escape from the horrors that lurked within. As the darkness closed in around them, Alara felt her mind reeling in confusion. The symbol seemed to be burning itself into her retina, its forbidden truth echoing through her mind like a mantra. And yet she knew they had to keep moving, for in this abyss, every second counted. Flynn pulled her forward, his eyes fixed on some distant point ahead. Alara followed him blindly, her heart pounding in her chest as the creatures closed in around them. The air was filled with the stench of ozone and decay, the very fabric of reality seeming to unravel before their eyes. As they stumbled through the wreckage, Alara felt herself being drawn toward some unspeakable fate, a destiny that would change everything. And yet she knew they were running out of time, for in this abyss, there was no escape from the horrors that lurked within. The darkness seemed to be closing in around them, the twisted pillars and walls crumbling into dust as the creatures converged on their position. Flynn's grip on her hand tightened as he pulled her forward, but Alara knew they were trapped, for in this abyss, there was no escape. And then, just as all hope seemed lost, a figure emerged from the shadows, a woman with skin as white as marble and eyes that burned like embers. Her gaze seemed to bore into their souls, her presence radiating an aura of power and mystery. "Welcome," she said, her voice dripping with an otherworldly sweetness. "I've been waiting for you." Alara's heart skipped a beat as the woman reached out, her hand closing around Flynn's wrist like a vice. "You have something that belongs to me," she whispered, her eyes burning with an unnatural intensity. And in that moment, Alara knew they were doomed, trapped in this abyss, surrounded by horrors that threatened to consume them all. Chapter 10. The eternal silence. As the woman's grip on Flynn's wrist tightened, Alara felt a chill run down her spine. She tried to speak, but her voice was frozen in her throat. The woman's eyes seemed to bore into their souls, as if searching for some hidden truth. "You have something that belongs to me," she repeated, her voice dripping with an otherworldly sweetness. "Something that can only be mine." Flynn struggled against the woman's grip, but it was like trying to break free from a vice. The woman's strength was supernatural, and Alara knew they were no match for her. The creatures closed in around them, their twisted bodies moving with an unnatural purpose. Alara felt herself being pulled toward some unspeakable fate, a destiny that would change everything. But the woman's gaze seemed to be holding Flynn back, as if she was willing him to surrender. And slowly but surely, he began to relax, his struggles growing weaker. Alara knew they had to act fast. She glanced around frantically, searching for some way out of this nightmare. But there was none, only the endless expanse of wreckage and the creatures that lurked within. As she looked back at Flynn, she saw a look of resignation creeping onto his face. He seemed to be accepting his fate, as if he knew they were trapped in this abyss with no escape. The woman's grip on his wrist tightened, her eyes burning with an unnatural intensity. "You have something that belongs to me," she whispered again, her voice echoing through the silence like a death knell. And then, just as all hope seemed lost, Alara remembered the symbol etched into the surface of the monolith. She reached out and grabbed it, feeling its pulsing energy coursing through her veins. The woman's eyes snapped toward hers, her gaze burning with an unnatural intensity. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered, her voice dripping with menace. As Alara felt the symbol's power coursing through her, she knew they had one chance to escape, but it would require a sacrifice. And so, with a surge of adrenaline, she plunged forward into the unknown. The darkness closed in around them once more, the creatures converging on their position like a deadly tide. But Alara didn't look back. Instead, she focused all her energy on the symbol, feeling its power coursing through her veins. As they stumbled forward, the woman's grip on Flynn's wrist began to loosen. He took advantage of the distraction, breaking free and sprinting toward the shadows. The creatures gave chase, their twisted bodies moving with an unnatural purpose. Alara followed close behind, the symbol's energy guiding her through the wreckage. She could feel its power coursing through her, drawing her toward some unspeakable truth, a forbidden knowledge that threatened to shatter the very fabric of reality. As they emerged from the shadows, Alara saw a glimmer of hope on the horizon. A vast expanse of darkness stretched out before them, the stars twinkling like diamonds in the distance. But as they approached the edge of the abyss, Alara felt a sense of unease growing within her. The symbol's power was coursing through her veins, but she knew it came at a terrible cost, for every step forward brought them closer to the edge of sanity. And yet, she knew they had to keep moving, for in this eternal silence, there was no escape from the horrors that lurked within. Chapter 11. The Descent into Madness. As Alara gazed out at the seemingly endless expanse of darkness before them, a sense of creeping dread began to seep into her bones. The symbol's power coursed through her veins like liquid ice, numbing her senses and rendering her thoughts foggy and disjointed. She felt herself becoming increasingly disoriented, as if she was floating through a sea of madness. The creatures, sensing their vulnerability, closed in around them once more, their twisted bodies seeming to blend together into a nightmarish amalgamation of flesh and darkness. Flynn, still running wildly through the shadows, seemed to be oblivious to the danger lurking at every turn. Alara's heart pounded in her chest as she watched him, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. "Flynn, stop!" she shouted, but her voice was lost in the vacuum of silence. He didn't seem to hear her anyway, his determination to escape the abyss driving him forward like a madman. As Alara struggled to keep pace with Flynn's frantic strides, the symbol's power surged through her once more. The world around her began to distort and writhe, as if reality itself was unraveling before her eyes. She stumbled and staggered, her vision blurring at the edges. The darkness seemed to be closing in on them from all sides, a living entity that sought to consume them whole. Alara felt herself being pulled toward it, as if she was being drawn into some ancient, abyssal vortex. The stars twinkling in the distance grew dimmer and more distant, until they were nothing but faint, flickering embers. As Flynn vanished into the shadows, Alara found herself alone and lost in a sea of eternal silence. The creatures, sensing her isolation, crept closer, their twisted faces contorted in macabre grins. She knew she had to keep moving, but where? And for what purpose? The symbol's power still coursed through her veins, drawing her toward some unspeakable truth. Alara felt herself becoming increasingly detached from reality, as if she was drifting into a dream world of unholy terrors. And yet she pressed on, driven by a morbid curiosity and an unyielding determination to uncover the secrets hidden within this desolate expanse. The abyss seemed to be swallowing her whole, but she refused to give in, not until she had uncovered the truth that lay at its heart. As Alara stumbled forward into the darkness, the creatures closed in around her, their twisted bodies weaving together like a macabre dance. She knew they were drawing closer, their malevolent intentions clear as day. But still she pressed on, driven by some primal urge to uncover the secrets hidden within this desolate expanse. The symbol's power pulsed through her veins, guiding her toward some unspeakable truth. And so, with a sense of grim determination, Alara plunged deeper into the abyss, ready to face whatever horrors lay in store for her. Chapter 12. The eternal silence deepens as Alara delved deeper into the abyss. The darkness seemed to thicken and congeal around her. She stumbled forward, her senses blunted by the oppressive weight of the silence. The creatures, sensing her vulnerability, crept closer, their twisted faces contorted in macabre grins. The symbol's power still coursed through her veins, drawing her toward some unspeakable truth. Alara felt herself becoming increasingly detached from reality, as if she was drifting into a dream world of unholy terrors. The abyss seemed to be swallowing her whole, but she refused to give in, not until she had uncovered the secrets hidden within this desolate expanse. As she stumbled forward, the stars above grew dimmer and more distant, their light struggling to penetrate the impenetrable veil of darkness. Alara felt herself being pulled towards some unknown destination, driven by a morbid curiosity and an unyielding determination to uncover the truth that lay at the heart of this desolate expanse. The creatures closed in around her, their twisted bodies weaving together like a macabre dance. She knew they were drawing closer, their malevolent intentions clear as day. But still, she pressed on, driven by some primal urge to uncover the secrets hidden within this abyssal void. As Alara stumbled forward, The silence seemed to deepen and intensify until it was almost palpable. The air grew colder, heavier with an unspeakable presence that lurked just beyond the edge of perception. She could feel it watching her, waiting for her to make some fatal mistake. And then, without warning, the silence shattered. A faint whisper echoed through the void, like a ghostly sigh on the wind. Alara's heart skipped a beat as she froze in terror, her senses overwhelmed by the sudden cacophony of sounds that erupted from nowhere and everywhere at once. The creatures, sensing her fear, redoubled their efforts to encircle her, their twisted faces contorted in malevolent grins, their eyes blazing with an unholy light. Alara knew she was trapped, cornered by the abyss itself. But still, she refused to give in. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled determination, she launched herself forward, dashing through the shadows as if driven by some primal urge to escape the clutches of the abyss. The symbol's power surged through her veins once more, guiding her toward some unknown destination. Alara stumbled and staggered, her vision blurring at the edges as she hurtled toward some unseen fate. And then, without warning, everything went black. Alara collapsed to the ground, her world reduced to a dull gray haze. The symbol's power seemed to fade away, leaving her feeling drained and exhausted. She knew she had to keep moving, but where? And for what purpose? As she struggled to regain her footing, Alara realized that the silence had returned, deeper and more oppressive than ever before. The creatures had vanished into the shadows, their twisted bodies dissolving into nothingness like mist in the morning sun. But Alara knew they would return. She could feel it, lurking just beyond the edge of perception. And then, as she stumbled forward into the darkness, a faint whisper echoed through the void once more. The silence seemed to deepen and intensify until it was almost palpable. Alara's heart skipped a beat as she froze in terror, her senses overwhelmed by the weight of the abyss. She knew she had to keep moving, but where? And for what purpose? The symbol's power still pulsed through her veins, guiding her toward some unknown destination. Alara stumbled forward, driven by a morbid curiosity and an unyielding determination to uncover the secrets hidden within this desolate expanse. As she plunged deeper into the abyss, the darkness seemed to thicken and congeal around her once more. The creatures lurked just beyond the edge of perception, waiting for their moment to strike, and Alara knew that she was running out of time.